There is a mountain that does not speak, not because it has nothing to say, but because it has learned how to listen. Throughout the night, as the wind carries what words cannot, this mountain remains steady, open, and patient, allowing rest to arrive without effort and leave without being rushed. This is not a story about events or answers. It is a story about slowing down, about the quiet space that forms when nothing asks anything of you, and about the calm that stays even after the night has faded. If you are tired of holding the day together, if your mind is still moving while your body wants to rest, this story invites you to stop searching and simply listen until sleep finds you on its own. There was a mountain that did not hurry. It stood in a quiet part of the land where paths softened and footsteps slowly forgot their urgency. Snow visited it sometimes. Clouds passed through often, and the night rested against its slopes without asking permission. The mountain had always been there, steady and patient, allowing the world to move around it. What made this mountain different was not how it stood, it was how it listened. The wind arrived gently that night, as it always did, not with force, not with intention, just movement finding space. It brushed against the grass first, then climbed slowly upward, touching stone, slipping into narrow places, resting briefly before moving again. The mountain did not resist. It did not echo. It did not answer. It listened. The wind carried many things. Most of them were too light to notice. Breaths from distant valleys, warmth from places where people slept, the faint memory of voices that had spoken during the day and fallen quiet by night. None of these things stayed long, but the mountain stayed. Below, far from the highest ridge, a single light faded inside a small house. The world settled into its nighttime rhythm. Doors closed, thoughts slowed, bodies turned toward rest. The mountain noticed none of this directly. It only felt the wind. The wind moved in slow patterns, like a thought that did not need to be completed. It circled, paused, returned. Each pass felt softer, as if the wind itself was learning to be careful. Sometimes the wind carried heaviness, not weight, emotion, the kind that does not announce itself, that does not demand attention, that simply exists. The mountain did not ask where it came from. It did not try to understand. It allowed the wind to place that heaviness down for a moment. This was how listening worked here, not through response, not through action, through space. The night deepened without effort. Stars settled into their places. The sky stretched wide and calm, holding everything without sorting or judging. The wind slowed. It moved across the mountain's surface like a whisper meant for no one in particular. It spoke of tired days, of long pauses, of people who had carried more than they realized and were finally letting their thoughts loosen as sleep approached. The mountain listened without memory. It did not keep what it heard. It did not carry stories forward. It simply made room. This made the wind gentler. Movement softened when it was not pushed away. Sound lowered itself when it did not need to be heard clearly. The wind began to linger, staying longer than usual, drifting instead of passing through. Somewhere far below, a breath deepened, not because of anything dramatic, not because of understanding, because the night felt safe. The mountain did not know this. It did not need to. Listening does not require awareness of impact. It only requires presence. The wind brushed along a quiet ridge, then settled briefly in a hollow where stone curved inward. It rested there, moving slowly, almost lazily, as if it had nowhere else it needed to be. Time stretched. Minutes passed, or hours. It did not matter. Nothing here counted. The mountain remained, the wind moved, the night held them both. If someone had been awake to see it, they might have thought nothing was happening. And that would have been true. Nothing needed to happen. The mountain did not change, the wind did not stop. But something softened, the kind of softening that cannot be measured, the kind that happens when effort is released and attention is no longer pulled outward. The mountain listened, the wind spoke, and the night, wide and patient, allowed everything else to fall quiet, thought by thought, breath by breath, until listening itself became enough. Somewhere between movement and stillness, rest found its way in, not suddenly, not forcefully, naturally, and the mountain remained just as it always had, listening to the wind as the world slowly, gently drifted toward sleep. The wind returned before dawn, not because it was called, and not because it had somewhere to go. It returned the way breath returns, naturally, quietly, without decision. It moved along the lower slopes first, careful not to disturb the night that was still resting. The mountain remained awake in its own way, not alert, not watchful, present. The wind carried little sound now. Whatever voices it had held earlier had softened into impressions, feelings without words, pauses without explanation, the kind of things people leave behind when they finally stop thinking and allow sleep to come. The mountain listened. It did not try to gather meaning. It did not separate one feeling from another. It allowed the wind to arrive whole, without sorting what was light and what was heavy. This made the wind slower. When nothing demands clarity, movement becomes gentler. The wind drifted across stone and earth, as if testing whether it was allowed to stay. It curved around edges, settled briefly in shallow spaces, then moved again. Somewhere far away, a person turned in their sleep. A thought loosened. A worry released its grip. The wind carried this release upward, not as a story, but as a softness. The mountain felt it pass through and did nothing with it. Listening does not hold. Listening lets go. The night was still deep, but it no longer felt heavy. Darkness rested evenly, like a blanket placed without haste. Stars dimmed slightly as the sky prepared for morning, though morning itself was in no rush to arrive. The wind moved in small circles now. It spoke of things never said out loud, of apologies that stayed inside, of tired kindness, of days that asked too much and nights that gave too little. The mountain did not react. It did not agree or disagree. It remained wide enough to receive everything without becoming full. This was why the wind trusted it. When words are unsaid, they need somewhere to go, not to be answered, not to be solved, just to exist without pressure. The mountain gave that space. The wind slowed even more, almost hovering. It touched the mountain the way a hand rests briefly on a familiar surface, not to take anything, not to leave anything, just to feel grounded. Time passed quietly. There was no signal marking it, no change that needed attention. The night continued its slow movement toward morning, and the mountain continued its listening without interruption. Far below, breath after breath deepened. Bodies rested more fully. Thoughts that had circled earlier now moved less, then not at all. The wind carried this quiet upward. It did not rush, it did not spill. It delivered stillness the way it had delivered restlessness earlier, without judgment, without preference. The mountain received it all the same way. Stone does not choose. Stone allows. The wind traced the mountain's shape slowly, learning it without needing to remember. Each pass felt softer than the last, as if the wind itself was growing tired, content to move without purpose. This tiredness was not exhaustion. It was release. The kind that comes when nothing is expected of you, when no response is required, when listening is enough. The mountain did not signal completion. It did not indicate that anything had been resolved, but something eased. The wind began to thin, not disappearing, just becoming lighter. It spread itself across the slopes and valleys, touching everything briefly, then letting go. The night remained calm. Morning waited at a distance, and the mountain stayed exactly as it was, listening, allowing, unmoved by what passed through it. Somewhere between the last quiet thought and the first light breath of dawn, the wind rested completely. Not stopped, at peace. And in that gentle pause, sleep deepened wherever it had already begun, carrying the world softly forward, while the mountain continued its quiet work, listening to what was unsaid and asking for nothing in return. The mountain had always been patient, but patience, like listening, has layers. There is the patience of standing still, and then there is the patience of staying open. As the night continued to loosen its hold, the wind returned again, not stronger, not faster, just present. It moved the way someone moves when they are no longer rushing anywhere, slow enough to notice where they are, gentle enough to remain. The mountain listened as it always did, but something subtle shifted. Earlier, listening had been effortless. Now it required trust. The wind no longer carried only softness. It brought fragments of restlessness, small fading echoes of thoughts that had not fully settled, worries that drifted without direction, questions that had lost their urgency but not yet their shape. The mountain did not hurry these things away. It did not try to calm them. It allowed them to pass at their own pace. This was patience, not the kind that waits for silence, but the kind that stays present while sound fades on its own. The wind circled a narrow ridge, brushing stone again and again, as if repeating itself. It moved forward, then returned, unsure whether it was finished. Each pass felt lighter, but also hesitant. The mountain did not interrupt. Patience does not rush completion. Somewhere below, a body shifted slightly in sleep. A breath caught for a moment, then released. The wind carried that small pause upward, letting it dissolve against the mountain's surface. The mountain felt the pause and stayed. This staying mattered. When nothing reacts, restlessness loses its momentum. When nothing pushes back, tension softens without instruction. The wind began to slow, not because it was forced, but because there was no reason to hurry. The night held this gently. Stars faded one by one, not disappearing, just stepping back. Darkness thinned in places, though the sky remained calm and deep. The world was not waking yet, but it was preparing quietly. The wind changed direction. It moved downward now, then sideways, then back again, exploring without purpose. Each movement felt less like searching and more like wandering. This wandering was safe. The mountain allowed it. Patience, the mountain learned, is not about enduring movement until it stops. It is about allowing movement to be what it is, without turning away. The wind brushed a hollow where stone curved inward, then settled there briefly. It stayed longer than before, resting without instruction. The air grew still around it, as if waiting was no longer necessary. Time stretched again, not long, not short, unmeasured. The mountain did not count moments. It did not track progress. It did not assume that quiet meant arrival. It trusted the process of settling. Far away, another breath deepened, then another. Sleep moved more fully now, not because it was guided, but because nothing resisted it. The wind carried this depth lightly, spreading it across the land without holding on to it. The mountain listened, steady and unchanged. This was patience without expectation. The wind eventually moved on, not abruptly, not completely. It thinned, softened, became part of the background. The air rested where it passed. Nothing announced the change. Nothing needed to. The mountain remained, listening, staying, allowing. And in that allowing, patience became something deeper than waiting. It became trust that rest would come when it was ready, that silence would arrive without being demanded, and that sleep, once invited by gentleness, always knows how to find its way. The night continued, calm and unhurried, and beneath the listening mountain, the world rested more fully now, breath by breath, thought by thought, carried forward by patience that did not ask to be noticed, and peace that did not need to be complete to be real. The wind did not leave when the night began to change. It stayed, not clinging, not lingering with intention, just remaining where movement felt easy. The mountain felt it again, lighter than before, softer, as if the wind itself had learned something simply by being listened to. Nothing hurried now. The air moved slowly enough that even movement felt like rest. The mountain listened, not with effort, not with focus, with ease. The wind brushed along familiar paths, but it no longer circled restlessly. It drifted forward, then paused, then drifted again. Each pause felt longer than the last, not because time stretched, but because nothing pushed it forward. This was new. Earlier, the wind had carried unsaid things, thoughts, emotions, weight. Now it carried less, or perhaps it carried the same things, but without tension. Somewhere far below, sleep deepened. Not the light kind that comes and goes, but the heavier kind, the kind where the body forgets itself, where thoughts stop forming words, where breathing becomes slow and steady without instruction. The wind felt this depth. It moved carefully, as if not wanting to disturb anything. It softened its edges, lowered its sound, allowed itself to become part of the night rather than something moving through it. The mountain remained still. Listening does not mean holding attention tightly. It means allowing attention to relax. The sky above shifted almost imperceptibly. Darkness remained, but it felt thinner now, like a curtain gently settling rather than hanging heavy. Stars dimmed further, not disappearing, just resting behind the coming light. The wind slowed again. It slid across stone and earth like a quiet thought that no longer needs to be finished. It touched the mountain's surface and stayed for a moment, resting where the air felt calmest. There was no reason to move on. This stillness was not emptiness. It was fullness without effort. The mountain felt the absence of urgency. It felt how movement changes when nothing is expected. The wind no longer needed to carry anything. It did not need to speak. It simply breathed. The mountain breathed too, in its own way, through balance, through weight resting exactly where it belonged. Time continued without markers. Minutes passed, or perhaps hours. It made no difference. The night held everything in the same gentle way, without pulling toward morning or pushing away darkness. The wind thinned further, not leaving, settling. It became part of the background, part of the quiet that filled the space between things. The air felt smoother now, less divided. Everything belonged to the same slow rhythm. Somewhere, a final thought loosened its grip. Not solved, released. Sleep moved deeper. The wind felt it and stayed silent. The mountain listened. This was not the silence of absence. It was the silence of arrival. Nothing needed to change anymore. Nothing needed to continue or end. The night had done what it needed to do, simply by allowing everything to slow down. The wind rested completely now, not gone, at ease, and the mountain remained steady, listening, unchanged, while rest spread quietly across the land, breath by breath, thought by thought, until even the idea of movement faded into a calm that did not ask for attention. In that calm, sleep held gently, and the mountain listened still as the world drifted deeper into rest, carried not by effort, but by the simple, patient slowing of the wind. By now, The night had learned its own rhythm, not fast, not slow, steady. The wind returned again, but this time it did not arrive as movement. It arrived as presence, a gentle awareness in the air, barely noticeable unless one was already paying attention. The mountain noticed. It listened the same way it always had, without effort, without intention. The wind did not circle or search anymore. It rested against the mountain as if it had finally understood that nothing was required of it. This was important. When nothing is required, the body softens. When nothing is expected, the mind releases. The wind felt this release and became quieter still. It moved only when it needed to, a slow drift here, a small shift there. Each motion felt unimportant, and because of that, it was enough. Far below, sleep had deepened again. Not the sleep that comes from exhaustion, but the sleep that comes from safety. The kind where breathing grows slow and even, where the body sinks into itself without resistance. The wind carried this calm upward, not as sound, but as balance. The mountain did not react. Listening does not interrupt. The air felt thicker now, not heavy, but settled, as if everything that could fall had already fallen, and nothing new needed to be carried. The wind did not push through the night anymore. It blended into it. The sky remained dark, but gentle. No sharp stars, no sudden brightness, just a wide, quiet covering that asked nothing from the land beneath it. The mountain stayed exactly as it was. Stillness was no longer an effort here. It was natural. The wind brushed along the mountain's surface once more, not to move forward, but to stay connected. It touched stone lightly, then paused, then rested again. This was not hesitation, it was comfort. The wind had learned something important, that moving slowly does not mean falling behind, that resting does not mean stopping, that patience does not need to be earned. The mountain listened to this learning without responding. Somewhere, a breath became deeper than before. Somewhere else, a muscle released. Somewhere else, a thought drifted away and did not return. The wind felt these changes and did nothing with them. That was its gift. The night continued without any clear direction. Morning was still far enough away to not matter. Darkness remained soft and wide, holding everything in place without pressure. The wind grew so gentle that it was almost still. Almost. It moved just enough to remind the world that it was there, but not enough to wake anything. It existed in the space between motion and rest, like a thought that no longer needs words. The mountain listened. Time passed unnoticed, and in that unmeasured time, something settled completely, not as an event, not as a realization, but as a feeling of enoughness. Nothing more was needed. Nothing else had to happen. The wind did not hurry. and because it did not hurry, the night remained kind. The mountain stayed, listening, allowing, holding nothing. And beneath that quiet listening, sleep deepened naturally, gently, the way it always does when the world finally stops asking questions. The wind rested, the mountain listened, and the night continued, calm, slow, and safe, carrying everything softly toward rest.
The wind did not disappear. It simply changed its way of being. Earlier, it had moved because movement felt necessary. Now it moved only when rest allowed it. The difference was subtle, but the mountain felt it immediately. The wind was no longer searching. It was resting while awake. The mountain listened, not with attention pulled forward, not with effort held tight, but with the kind of listening that happens when nothing else is demanding space. The air felt settled, as if the night itself had exhaled and decided not to inhale too quickly again. The wind drifted low along the slope, touching the ground gently, then lifting just enough to continue. It was slow but not heavy, light but not scattered, balanced. Somewhere far away, a mind stopped checking whether sleep had arrived yet. The question loosened. The answer no longer mattered. The wind carried that letting go upward. The mountain did nothing with it. Listening does not collect. It allows.
The night felt wide now, stretched softly across the land. Darkness no longer pressed down. It rested lightly, like a familiar blanket that did not need adjusting. The sky remained quiet, holding its distance without feeling far away. The wind slowed further. It no longer brushed against every surface. It chose a path and stayed with it, following curves it already knew. This familiarity made movement gentle, predictable, safe. The mountain felt the calm deepen, not as silence, but as ease. Rest is not the absence of motion. It is motion without resistance. The wind rested by moving slowly enough to notice itself. It paused in shallow spaces, lingered briefly, then moved on without regret. Each pause felt complete. Time softened. There was no edge to it anymore, no sense of before or after, only the steady present, holding everything equally. Below, sleep grew heavier, not sudden, not dramatic, gradual. The body forgot where it ended and the night began. Breath moved on its own. Muscles released their final effort. Thoughts thinned until they became impressions without shape. The wind sensed this and grew quieter still. It did not celebrate the calm. It respected it. The mountain remained unchanged, listening without involvement. It did not guide the wind toward rest. It did not signal that enough had been done. It simply stayed. This staying mattered. When nothing leaves, rest feels permitted. When nothing reacts, the need to perform fades. The wind learned this by experience, not instruction. It slowed until movement and stillness felt almost the same. Almost.
The air felt smooth now, undisturbed, as if everything that needed to pass through had already done so. Nothing new waited at the edge. The mountain listened. The wind rested. The night held both. There was no clear moment when rest became complete, no signal that announced arrival. Calm does not arrive with certainty. It settles quietly, piece by piece. The wind drifted once more, then paused for longer than before. Not stopping, resting. This was enough. The mountain remained, steady and patient, listening without keeping, allowing without asking. And beneath that quiet presence, sleep settled fully, naturally, gently, without effort, without thought, without need. The wind no longer tried to move the night forward. It stayed where it was. And in that staying, everything else followed, softly, slowly, into a rest that felt safe, deep, and unbroken.
By now, the night felt complete. Not finished, complete. There was nothing more it needed to do, nowhere else it needed to go. Darkness rested evenly across the land, neither deepening nor fading. It simply stayed, wide and calm, like a held breath that did not ask to be released. The mountain felt this stillness settle. It listened, as it always had, without shifting its weight, without adjusting its presence. The wind was still there too, though barely noticeable now. It no longer moved in clear paths. It existed as a softness in the air, a gentle awareness that had no direction. This was the quietest the night had been. Not silent, settled. The wind did not speak anymore. It did not carry thoughts or feelings or pauses. Whatever it had brought earlier had already been set down. There was nothing left to deliver. The mountain listened anyway. Listening does not stop when sound ends. It continues as openness. Somewhere far below, sleep reached a deeper place, the kind where dreams soften into images without story, where the mind lets go of shape and order, where rest no longer needs reassurance. Breathing slowed further. Even the pauses between breaths felt calm. The wind felt this and remained still, as if aware that movement was no longer needed. It stayed close to the mountain, resting in shallow spaces, blending into the night so completely that it could not be separated from it. Time faded, not disappeared, lost its edges. Moments no longer followed one another. They simply existed, layered gently, without sequence. The night held them all the same way. The mountain did not mark this change. It did not notice depth or duration. It stayed. The sky above felt distant and kind. No sharp light, no sudden shift, just a wide, dark covering that allowed everything below to rest without interruption. The wind became almost imperceptible now, not gone, integrated. It was part of the night's breath, part of the land's quiet rhythm. Nothing moved quickly enough to be noticed. Nothing stayed long enough to require attention. This was rest without instruction. The mountain listened.
Listening at this point required nothing. There was no effort left to release, no tension left to soften. Everything that could settle had already done so. Somewhere, a final awareness slipped away. Not lost, set aside. Sleep deepened again, reaching the kind of calm where the body feels heavy but safe, where the mind floats gently without direction. The wind did not disturb this. It stayed still enough to protect it. The mountain remained steady, its presence unchanged, its listening uninterrupted. It did not hold the night together. It did not create the calm. It simply allowed it. The night held its breath. And because nothing rushed it, nothing broke it. There was no ending here, no transition to mark, just a quiet continuation of rest spreading softly across the land, touching everything without asking to be noticed. The wind rested, the mountain listened, and the night stayed exactly as it was, wide, gentle, and complete, carrying sleep forward in the simplest way possible, until even the idea of waking felt distant and unnecessary. Nothing needed to happen next. The night was already enough.
The night did not move forward. It stayed, not paused, not delayed, simply present, holding everything exactly where it belonged. Darkness rested gently across the land, and the mountain felt no need to change its listening. The wind was still there, very quiet now. It did not travel far. It did not rise or fall noticeably. It remained close to the mountain, as if keeping watch without intention, not guarding, not protecting, just staying nearby. The mountain listened. Listening at this hour was effortless. There were no sounds to follow, no movement to notice. The wind had become part of the stillness, a soft layer within the calm rather than something passing through it. Below, sleep was deep and undisturbed, not the kind that shifts or stirs, the kind that settles fully into the body. It stayed because staying felt natural. This was not vigilance. It was trust. The mountain trusted the night. The wind trusted the calm. The night trusted itself. Nothing shifted. Nothing was required to. The air felt smooth and even, as if all movement had found its proper place. The wind no longer separated itself from the darkness. It belonged to it completely now. The mountain listened still, not waiting, not expecting, simply present. This was the deepest part of the night, not because it was darker, but because it was uninterrupted. No thought interrupted rest. No movement interrupted stillness. No sound interrupted silence. The wind did not need to move on. The mountain did not need to change. The night did not need to end. Everything that could settle had already settled. Sleep rested where it was, deep and safe, carried not by effort or intention, but by the gentle agreement of everything to remain as it was. The wind kept watch. The mountain listened,
and the night, wide and patient, continued to hold the world softly, without sound, without motion, without asking anything in return, until rest felt complete enough to last on its own. This was the deepest part of the night, not because it was darker, but because it was uninterrupted. No thought interrupted rest. No movement interrupted stillness. No sound interrupted silence. The wind did not need to move on. The mountain did not need to change. The night did not need to end. Everything that could settle had already settled. Sleep rested where it was, deep and safe, carried not by effort or intention, but by the gentle agreement of everything to remain as it was. The wind kept watch, the mountain listened, and the night, wide and patient, continued to hold the world softly, without sound, without motion, without asking anything in return, until rest felt complete enough to last on its own. The night had reached a place where memory no longer mattered, not because anything was forgotten, but because nothing needed to be held. The mountain felt this immediately. The air no longer carried impressions or traces. Whatever had passed through earlier, the thoughts, the weight, the pauses, had already settled and dissolved. The mountain listened, but there was nothing left to gather. The wind remained, very faint now, almost indistinguishable from stillness. It did not circle or drift. It rested where it was, without awareness of itself. Movement and rest had become nearly the same thing. This was the quiet that comes after effort had ended. Below, sleep had moved beyond depth into ease. The body no longer adjusted. Breathing was slow and natural, without pattern or intention. The mind no longer shaped images or ideas. Nothing asked for attention. The wind sensed this and stayed exactly as it was. It did not protect the calm. It did not maintain it. It trusted it. The night felt smooth, uninterrupted, like a surface that could not be disturbed. Darkness did not press down or pull inward. It simply existed, wide and neutral, holding everything equally. The mountain remained steady. Listening now was not an action, it was a condition.
When nothing asks to be remembered, the mind releases its grip completely. There is no need to track time, no reason to notice change. The night flows without direction, and the body follows. The wind no longer carried meaning. It no longer carried sound. It carried balance. Time lost its shape. Moments did not follow one another. They overlapped softly, like layers of rest. The night did not deepen or thin. It stayed exactly where it was, unmarked and calm. The mountain did not notice this sameness. It did not require contrast. Somewhere, a final trace of awareness slipped gently away. Not suddenly, not fully, just enough to allow rest to exist on its own. The wind did not move. The air felt complete. This was not emptiness. It was fullness without effort. Nothing waited to happen next. Nothing prepared for morning. The night did not anticipate change. It trusted that when change arrived, it would arrive on its own. The mountain listened without listening for anything. The wind stayed without staying for a reason. And the night held the world in this quiet agreement. No memory, no direction, no demand. Just rest, deep and unbroken, spreading gently through every breath and pause. Nothing needed to be remembered. Nothing needed to be carried forward.
Sleep rested fully now, safe and steady, held by the simplest truth of the night. When nothing asks anything of you, rest comes naturally. The mountain remained, the wind rested, and the night continued, wide, still, and complete, asking nothing, holding everything, and allowing sleep to remain exactly where it belonged. Morning was still far away, not absent, just patient. The night knew this, and it did not hurry itself toward change. Darkness rested where it was, soft and even, as if time itself had chosen to slow down. The mountain felt no signal of ending. It listened. The wind was barely there now, not moving in any clear direction, not carrying anything new. It existed as a gentle presence, like a reminder that motion was once possible, but no longer necessary. Everything felt settled. Below, sleep had reached a place where effort no longer existed. The body rested fully, supported by the quiet of the night. Breathing moved on its own, slow and steady, without awareness of rhythm. The night protected this rest simply by staying the same. The mountain did not expect dawn. The wind did not prepare to leave. Nothing leaned forward. This was the deepest kindness of the night. When change is not rushed, rest feels safe. There is no pressure to wake, no tension beneath the calm. The body does not brace for what comes next. It stays where it is, supported by stillness. The wind softened even more.
It did not disappear. It blended so fully into the air that it could no longer be separated from it. The difference between movement and stillness became meaningless. The mountain listened without distinction. Listening no longer meant receiving. It meant allowing the night to be complete. Time felt distant now, not gone, but irrelevant. Moments did not stack or pass. They rested beside one another, equal and quiet.
The sky remained dark and gentle. No sharp light touched the edges. No signal announced transition. Everything stayed suspended in a calm that did not need explanation. Somewhere, a final layer of tension released. Not noticed, not acknowledged, just gone. The wind felt this and remained quiet. The mountain stayed steady. The night did not rush morning because there was no need. Rest had found its place, and it was not finished yet. Nothing here required progress. Nothing needed resolution. This was not waiting. It was completion without ending. The night continued to hold the world softly.
Sleep rested deeply, undisturbed by thought or anticipation. The body remained heavy and safe, the mind empty in the most gentle way. When morning eventually arrived, it would do so naturally, without force, without interruption, without breaking what the night had made possible. But that moment was not now. Now the night stayed. The mountain listened. The wind rested. And everything remained exactly where it needed to be. Quiet, steady, and whole. Carried by a darkness that did not hurry change, and a calm that allowed sleep to last as long as it wished.
There comes a point in the night when even the smallest movements release themselves. Not suddenly, not completely. They simply loosen. The mountain felt this before anything else. The air around it no longer shifted, not because it was held still, but because it had nothing left to adjust. The wind was still present, but it no longer felt separate from the night. It had let go. The mountain listened. Listening now required nothing at all. There were no sounds to follow, no changes to notice. The wind did not arrive or leave. It existed as part of the calm, woven into the darkness so gently that it could not be traced. Below, sleep had reached its quiet center. The body rested without weight. Breathing moved so smoothly it felt like part of the night itself. The mind no longer reached outward or inward. Thoughts had thinned into silence without effort. Nothing was being held anymore.
The wind had carried many things earlier: pauses, emotions, the soft remains of long days. Now it carried nothing. It did not need to. Everything that could be set down already was. This emptiness was not absence. It was completion. The night felt wide and kind, stretching evenly across the land. There were no edges, no transitions, no sense of before or after. Time had softened into something unmeasured. The mountain did not mark this. It did not notice release. It simply remained open. The wind no longer watched or waited. It no longer rested with intention. It dissolved into the stillness, becoming indistinguishable from the calm it had helped create. This was not an ending. It was a settling so complete that nothing else was required.
Somewhere, awareness faded just enough to allow rest to stand on its own. The body did not check itself. The mind did not return to see if sleep was deep enough. It was. The mountain listened without listening for anything. The night did not protect this calm. It trusted it. Nothing shifted. Nothing stirred. And because nothing stirred, rest remained undisturbed. The wind had let go. The mountain stayed. The night held everything softly, without movement, without direction, without asking anything in return. Sleep rested fully now, deep, safe, and uninterrupted, carried not by effort, but by the quiet truth that nothing needed to be done. There was nowhere else to go. There was nothing else to become. The night did not rush forward. It stayed exactly as it was. And in that staying, the world remained asleep, peacefully, completely, while the mountain continued its quiet presence, listening not to sound, but to the calm that remained when even the wind had finally let go. The calm did not deepen anymore. It stayed, not growing, not fading, simply resting where it had settled. The mountain felt this steadiness immediately. There was no movement left to follow, no shift to allow. Everything had already arrived at its quiet place. The mountain listened, but listening no longer felt like an action. It felt like a state the night had entered and decided to remain within. The wind was still present, but it had no edges now. It did not brush or drift or pause. It existed as part of the air itself, indistinguishable from the stillness that surrounded it. Nothing was being carried. Nothing was being released. Below, sleep rested without depth or direction. The body no longer sank further. It simply remained supported. Breathing flowed gently, without rhythm needing attention. The spaces between breaths felt just as calm as the breaths themselves. The night did not ask for more rest. It trusted what was already there. The mountain did not hold the calm together. It did not protect it or preserve it. Calm does not need guarding when nothing is pulling against it. This was the kind of quiet that holds itself. Time had almost disappeared now. Not vanished, but softened so much that it no longer mattered. There was no sense of progress, no feeling of arrival or completion, only presence. The sky remained dark and even. No light pressed against the edges. No hint of morning disturbed the balance. The night knew it was not finished, and it did not hurry. Somewhere, a final effort released, not noticed, not remembered, just gone. The wind did not respond. The mountain did not shift. Nothing needed acknowledgement. This calm was not fragile. It did not depend on silence or darkness or distance. It existed because everything that once needed attention had already settled. The night held this calmly, without tension, without instruction. The mountain listened, but there was nothing left to hear, and that was enough. Rest did not deepen further because it did not need to. It had found its place and stayed there, steady and complete. The wind remained part of the air. The mountain remained part of the land. And the night continued, wide, gentle, and still, carrying sleep forward without effort, without interruption, without asking anything in return. Nothing needed to be held. Nothing needed to be remembered. The calm stayed on its own. And beneath the listening mountain, the world rested, quietly, safely, as if it had always known how to be here. Slow, unguarded, and completely at ease. The night had entered its longest part. Not the darkest, not the quietest, the steadiest. This was the middle of the night, the place where nothing changes quickly, where time stretches without asking to be measured. The mountain felt this immediately. There was no shift in the air, no movement to follow, only continuity. The mountain listened, but listening now felt like resting inside the moment rather than observing it. The night had stopped unfolding. It had settled into itself. The wind was still present, though it no longer felt like wind. It had become atmosphere, soft, even, without direction. It did not arrive or leave. It simply was. Below, sleep had no layers left to pass through. The body rested in a way that felt complete. Breathing moved quietly, without depth changing, without rhythm being noticed. The mind had stepped far enough back that even silence felt distant. Nothing asked to be adjusted. The night did not respond to this depth. It accepted it. The mountain did not mark the hour. It did not recognize that the night was long or that morning would eventually come. It stayed where it was, steady and unchanged. The sky remained dark and gentle, holding everything without emphasis. Stars were faint or hidden, not gone, but unnecessary. Darkness did not press or surround. It rested lightly, like something familiar that required no attention. The wind blended fully into this calm. There was no difference now between movement and stillness. The air felt smooth, uninterrupted, as if all transitions had already happened. Time no longer felt like a line. It felt like a wide space. The mountain listened without listening for anything. This was the part of the night where rest does not deepen anymore. It stabilizes. The body does not sink further. The mind does not quiet more. Everything simply stays, and staying feels safe. Somewhere awareness drifted so far back that it no longer checked itself. The body did not ask if it was sleeping. The mind did not notice that it was quiet. Rest existed on its own. The night did not try to protect this calm. It trusted it.
The wind did not hover or watch. It rested without intention, as natural as the darkness itself. Nothing moved fast enough to be noticed. Nothing stayed distinct enough to require attention. The mountain remained steady. Listening at this hour was not about receiving sound. It was about allowing the night to remain uninterrupted. This was not emptiness. It was fullness without effort. No memories surfaced. No thoughts returned. No questions formed. The middle of the night does not explain itself. It holds. The mountain did not change. The wind did not speak. The night continued, wide, even, and patient, carrying sleep forward without motion, without signal, without need. There was no sense of progress here, only presence. And presence was enough. The body rested where it was. The mind floated without shape. The world remained quiet without trying. The mountain listened. The wind rested. And the long middle of the night stayed exactly as it was, calm, steady, and complete, allowing sleep to continue without interruption, without awareness,
without the need for anything to happen next. Nothing moved forward. Nothing fell away. Everything simply remained. And in that remaining, rest held gently, as if the night itself had decided that this moment did not need to end.
The night did not change its mind. It stayed with what it had already become, wide, even, and quiet. The mountain felt this steadiness as something familiar now, like a truth that no longer needed repeating. Nothing pulled forward, nothing fell back. The mountain listened. Listening here was not effort, it was agreement, an understanding that staying did not require justification. The wind was present in the smallest way, not as movement, not as sound, more as a softness that made the air feel complete. It did not arrive or depart. It did not pause or drift. It stayed. Below, sleep rested where it had settled. The body did not sink further or rise. Breathing flowed without awareness, steady and unremarkable. The mind remained far from edges, no longer forming questions, no longer checking itself. This was rest without vigilance. The night did not ask the body to remain asleep. It did not guard the calm. It trusted it enough to leave it alone. The mountain understood this trust. Staying is not holding on. Staying is not resisting change. Staying is allowing the moment to be exactly what it is, without leaning away. The wind learned this too.
Earlier, it had moved carefully, slowed deliberately, rested intentionally. Now, it did none of these things. It existed as part of the night, not separate from it. There was no difference between air and stillness anymore. Time softened further, not into absence, but into neutrality. Moments no longer felt long or short. They did not arrive or pass. They rested beside one another, quiet and equal. The mountain did not count. It stayed. This was the night's quiet lesson, not spoken, not explained. That staying does not trap you. That staying does not prevent change. It prepares you for it. When nothing is forced forward, balance finds its place naturally. The night held this balance without attention. The mountain listened without focus. Somewhere, awareness thinned even more, not disappearing, just drifting far enough back to no longer interfere. The body rested without knowing it was resting. The mind floated without naming the calm. Nothing needed support. Nothing needed direction.
The wind did not need to move to prove it existed. The mountain did not need to listen to justify its presence. The night did not need to end to feel complete. Everything stayed. This staying felt safe, not because nothing could change, but because change did not need to happen now. The night understood timing without measuring it. Morning would come when it was ready. Until then, there was no reason to prepare. The mountain remained steady. Listening now was simply being there while nothing asked to be heard. The wind rested within the air, indistinguishable from it. The night continued without momentum, without pause, without expectation. Sleep remained deep and uninterrupted,
not guarded, not fragile, secure. The night teaches this quietly, that you do not have to hurry rest, that you do not have to manage calm, that staying is sometimes the most gentle thing you can do. The mountain stayed, the wind stayed, and the night, wide and patient, stayed too, holding the world in a calm that did not ask for attention, did not require effort, and did not need to be completed. Nothing moved forward. Nothing was lost. Everything remained just as it was, steady, quiet, and enough, allowing sleep to continue without awareness, without interruption, until even the idea of leaving felt unnecessary. The night taught how to stay, and in that staying, rest held on its own. The night knew light would come. It did not prepare for it. It did not lean toward it. It simply remained as it was, wide, calm, and unbothered by what waited beyond it. The mountain felt this quiet certainty, steady and unchanging, like a truth that did not need to be spoken. The mountain listened. The wind was still present, though it was almost impossible to tell where it ended and the air began. It no longer moved with intention. It rested as part of the night itself, soft and indistinct. Below, sleep remained deep, not drifting, not shifting. Rest had settled into a place where it no longer needed guidance. The body stayed heavy and supported. Breathing continued without rhythm being noticed. The mind remained far from edges, floating in a quiet that had no shape. The night held all of this without effort. Light waited far away, not pressing, not calling, just waiting.
The mountain did not sense anticipation. There was no tension in the air, no subtle pull forward. Darkness remained gentle, as if it understood that rest does not need to be interrupted to allow change later. The wind stayed still enough to protect nothing and disturb nothing. This was the quiet before light, not a pause filled with expectation, but a continuation of calm that did not rush toward transition. Time felt distant, not gone, unimportant. Moments rested beside one another without order. The night did not thin or deepen. It stayed even, as if balance had already been found and there was no reason to adjust it. The mountain listened without listening for anything. This was the part of the night where rest feels complete enough to trust, where the body no longer wonders if sleep will last, where the mind does not check whether it has gone far enough. Everything had already gone where it needed to go. The wind did not change direction. It did not fade or return. It simply belonged. Somewhere, a faint awareness hovered, not alert, not asleep, just distant enough to feel safe. The body did not respond to it. The night did not acknowledge it. Awareness drifted away again on its own. Nothing was required. The sky remained dark and kind. No light pressed against its edges. No signal announced that morning was near. Darkness was not holding back change. It was allowing rest to finish its work. The mountain stayed. The wind rested. The night continued without instruction. This quiet before light did not feel temporary. It felt complete, as if it could last forever without becoming heavy. Calm had no urgency now. It did not need to be preserved or extended. It existed. Sleep rested fully within it, deep, steady, unguarded. When light eventually arrived, it would not break this calm. It would simply join it. But that moment was still far enough away to not matter. For now the night remained exactly as it was. The mountain listened, the wind stayed close, and the world rested peacefully, held in a darkness that did not rush change, did not fear ending, and did not need to announce what would come next. Everything stayed quiet. Everything stayed safe. And in that quiet before light, rest continued naturally, soft, uninterrupted, and complete, until even the idea of waking felt distant, gentle, and unnecessary. The night did not end. It thinned, so gently that nothing noticed at first. Not the mountain, not the wind, not the sleeping world below. Darkness loosened its hold without stepping away, like a breath slowly released after being held for a long time. The mountain felt the change without reacting. It listened. The wind was still there, resting in the air, but it had grown lighter, not moving more, simply becoming less dense. It felt like space opening quietly, without pressure, without direction. Below, sleep remained deep. The body did not wake. The mind did not stir. Rest was not finished yet. The thinning of night did not disturb it. This was not the arrival of morning. It was the easing of darkness. The sky softened slightly, though no color appeared yet. Nothing brightened, nothing shifted sharply. The night remained kind, allowing rest to stay exactly where it was. The mountain did not mark this moment. It did not notice transition. Listening does not require recognition. The wind drifted just enough to feel present again, but it did not resume its earlier movement. It stayed close, quiet, careful not to pull anything forward too soon. The night understood timing. Rest cannot be rushed awake. The air felt wider now, less enclosed, still calm, still gentle, but open in a new way, like a room whose windows have been opened just a little, letting in space without letting in sound. Time returned slowly, not as urgency, as softness. Moments began to separate again, but they did not demand attention. They passed quietly, one beside the other, without order. The mountain remained steady. It listened without leaning forward. Below, sleep stayed deep enough to be undisturbed. The body rested where it was, supported and safe. Breathing remained slow, smooth, unchanged. The thinning night did not ask sleep to leave. It waited. The wind felt this patience and followed it. It did not carry anything new. It did not speak. It simply stayed present, light enough to move, quiet enough to remain unnoticed. This was the night preparing without preparation. Nothing shifted suddenly. Nothing announced change. The darkness did not retreat. It relaxed.
The mountain felt no difference between staying and allowing. It had learned that change does not require response. It arrives when space is made for it. Somewhere far below, A dream softened into something formless, not ending, just loosening. The mind rested without story, without image. The wind passed this softness upward and released it immediately. The night continued to thin, not into light, into openness. This openness felt safe. It did not invite waking, it did not call attention. It simply allowed the next phase of rest to exist naturally. The mountain listened. Listening now was simply remaining present while the night changed shape. The wind stayed gentle. Sleep remained deep. Everything moved together without instruction. When morning eventually came, it would arrive the same way, quietly, without force, without breaking what the night had held. But that moment was still distant. For now, the night thinned softly, carefully, like a promise kept slowly. The mountain stayed. The wind rested, and the world remained asleep, peaceful, unguarded, and steady, carried forward by a darkness that knew how to loosen without leaving, and a calm that did not need to end in order to change. Nothing rushed, nothing stirred. The night simply became lighter in its own time, while rest continued to hold, gentle and complete.
The wind noticed before anything else. Not as a thought, not as a signal, as a feeling. The night had grown lighter, not brighter, just softer. The air felt more open now, as if space itself had expanded gently. The wind remained, but it no longer felt necessary. It stayed anyway. The mountain listened. Listening had become simple presence by now. There was no distinction between sound and silence, movement and rest. Everything belonged to the same calm. Below, sleep continued, deep, steady, undisturbed. The body had not yet reached the edge where waking begins. Breathing remained slow and even. The mind rested far from form or memory. The night did not interrupt this. It allowed it to continue. The wind stayed close to the mountain, barely moving, like a companion who does not speak because words are no longer required. It had carried so much earlier, weight, pauses, unspoken things. Now it carried nothing. This was not emptiness, it was relief.
The mountain did not respond to this change. It did not thank the wind. It did not signal that its work was done. It simply remained, open and steady. The sky shifted almost imperceptibly. Darkness loosened further, not leaving, just thinning enough to make space. No color appeared yet. No light touched the edges. Morning was still distant. Time felt gentle again, not stretched, not collapsed, balanced. The wind moved slightly, then rested again. It was not deciding whether to stay or go. It was simply responding to the quiet that surrounded it. When calm holds itself, support becomes unnecessary. The mountain understood this without thought. Listening does not create dependence. It allows release. Below, a dream dissolved quietly, not ending, just fading into rest. The body did not follow it. Sleep remained steady and deep. The wind felt this and became even lighter, almost gone, but not rushed away, It stayed until it was no longer needed.
The night did not mark this moment. There was no clear shift, no boundary crossed. The wind did not leave suddenly. It thinned, blended, softened into the air until it could no longer be separated from it. Stillness remained. The mountain listened. Listening now was simply being present while the night continued its gentle change. There was no effort in it, no role to perform. The air felt complete on its own. Somewhere far below, a faint awareness hovered briefly, not waking, not dreaming, just present enough to feel safe. It did not stay. It drifted back into rest, without resistance. The wind did not return. It did not need to. The night held everything without assistance now. Calm had settled into a place where it no longer required support. The mountain remained steady, unchanged by the absence. Listening does not end when sound ends. It continues as openness. The sky remained soft and dark, though lighter than before. No brightness pressed forward. Nothing urged the world awake. Rest remained where it was. When the wind is no longer needed, it does not disappear. It becomes part of what remains. The mountain stayed. The night continued to thin gently. Sleep held steady, deep and undisturbed, carried not by effort or guidance, but by the quiet truth that everything had already done enough. Nothing rushed, nothing followed. The wind had stayed as long as it was needed, and now, without announcement, without absence, it rested within the calm it had helped create, leaving the mountain listening, the night softening, and the world sleeping peacefully, exactly where it belonged.
The night did not end when morning drew closer. It made room, so gently that nothing needed to wake in response. Darkness did not pull away sharply or retreat with urgency. It softened, like a curtain loosened just enough to let space breathe. The mountain felt this opening without shifting. It listened. The air was calm now in a different way, not as settled, not as deep, but wide and patient. The wind was no longer separate. It had blended so completely into the air that there was no sense of movement at all. Below, sleep remained steady. The body did not wake. The mind did not return. Rest stayed where it was, unbothered by what approached. Morning was still distant enough to be gentle. The sky began to change, but only slightly. Darkness thinned further, not into color yet, just into openness. Nothing brightened, nothing announced itself. The night understood that rest should not be startled awake. The mountain remained steady. Listening now meant allowing change without reacting to it. Time returned slowly, not as clocks or minutes, as softness. The mountain did not respond to this change. It did not thank the wind. It did not signal that its work was done. It simply remained, open and steady. The sky shifted almost imperceptibly. Darkness loosened further, not leaving, just thinning enough to make space. No color appeared yet. No light touched the edges. Morning was still distant. Time felt gentle again. not stretched, not collapsed, balanced. The wind moved slightly, then rested again. It was not deciding whether to stay or go. It was simply responding to the quiet that surrounded it. When calm holds itself, support becomes unnecessary. The mountain understood this without thought. Listening does not create dependence. It allows release. Below, a dream dissolved quietly, not ending, just fading into rest. The body did not follow it. Sleep remained steady and deep. The wind felt this and became even lighter, almost gone, but not rushed away. It stayed until it was no longer needed.
The night did not rush forward to become something else. It stayed present, even as it made space for what would follow. Below, sleep rested in its final deep stretch, not fragile, not light, complete. The body remained relaxed, the mind stayed distant. Awareness did not return yet. Everything was still supported by the quiet that had carried the night so far. The mountain listened. Listening now was simply remaining while the world prepared itself quietly. The night had done its work without effort. It had slowed everything down. It had held everything gently. And now it allowed space for change without disturbance. Morning would come, but not yet. For now, the night remained, lighter, wider, calm, making room without leaving, holding rest without clinging, and allowing sleep to remain exactly where it was. The mountain stayed, the air stayed still, and the world rested peacefully, carried forward by a night that knew how to loosen its hold without letting go too soon, preparing for morning not by ending, but by gently stepping aside. Morning arrived the way the night had promised it would, without urgency, without interruption. Light did not rush in or push darkness away. It appeared slowly, gently, as if asking permission to exist. The mountain felt this change without moving. It did not turn toward the light. It did not release the night. It listened. The air was calm in a new way now, open, quiet, ready. The wind did not return as movement. It remained as space, as softness, as the gentle feeling of breath continuing on its own. Below, sleep rested in its final, deepest place, not holding on, not resisting waking, just resting. The body remained heavy and supported. Breathing stayed slow and even. The mind floated without thought, without image, without awareness of time. Everything that needed rest had received it. The night had finished its work, and it did not announce that it was done. The sky lightened gradually, color arriving so faintly it could not be named. Darkness did not disappear. It softened, blending into the coming day without conflict. The mountain remained steady. Listening now was not about sound or silence. It was about continuity, about remaining present while one state gently became another. The wind did not return to speak. It had nothing left to carry. The calm remained without effort, no longer tied to darkness or night. It existed on its own, settled deep enough to stay, even as light grew. Below,
Awareness hovered for the first time, not waking, not sleeping, just present enough to feel safe. It did not stay long. It drifted back, choosing rest one final time before the day would eventually begin. The body did not move. The breath did not change. The mountain listened. Listening now meant allowing this choice without pressure. Morning continued to arrive slowly, respectfully. Light spread gently across the land, touching stone and earth without sharpness. Nothing was startled awake. Nothing needed to be. The night did not rush away. It stayed long enough to ensure that rest was complete. Then, quietly, it loosened its hold, not ending, not leaving, just making space. The mountain understood this. It had listened through movement and stillness, through sound and silence, through darkness and thinning light. It did not need to change now. Listening does not end when the night ends. It continues as presence. The air felt balanced. Calm no longer depended on the hour. It belonged to the body now, to the breath, to the quiet that remained even as the world prepared to wake. Below, sleep rested fully, not fragile, not shallow, complete. When waking would come, it would come gently, without pulling, without resistance. Rest would release itself naturally, the way it had arrived. The mountain remained, listening, not to the wind, not to the night, but to the calm that stayed behind when everything else had softened. The story did not end, it settled. And in that settling, sleep finished its work, quietly, safely, leaving behind a deep stillness that would remain long after eyes opened, long after the day began. The mountain stayed where it was. The air stayed calm. And somewhere, gently, naturally, the world rested one last moment longer, held not by darkness, not by sound, but by the simple, enduring presence of a mountain that listened all the way through the night and did not stop when morning arrived. The wind returned much later than before. Not suddenly, not with sound. It returned the way a thought sometimes returns in deep sleep, not clearly, not fully formed, but present enough to be felt. The mountain noticed this return immediately, not because anything changed, but because listening had never stopped. The mountain listened. The night was already calm, already settled, already complete in its own way. Darkness rested lightly now, thinner than before, but still kind. The air felt open, wide enough to hold both rest and the possibility of movement without tension. The wind did not arrive to disturb this. It arrived to join it. Earlier, the wind had stepped back because it was no longer needed. Now it returned, not because something was missing, but because everything was ready to hold a little more depth. The wind did not carry weight this time. It carried continuity. It moved slowly along the mountain's side, touching stone so gently that even touch felt optional. It did not search for hollows or ridges. It followed familiar paths without intention, like a presence that knows it belongs. Below, sleep continued, deep, steady, undisturbed.
The body rested fully, heavy and safe. Breathing flowed quietly, without rhythm being noticed. The mind remained far from thought, far from memory, floating in a calm that did not ask to be explored. The wind felt this and adjusted itself automatically. It slowed even further, not because it was told to, because the night required nothing more. The mountain did not respond to the wind's return. It did not welcome it or acknowledge it. Listening does not change when something arrives. It remains open the same way it always has. The air felt richer now, not heavier, but fuller, as if the night had added one more layer of quiet, not to deepen rest, but to extend it. Time stretched gently, losing its edges again. This was not a restart, it was an extension. The wind moved in long, slow currents, barely noticeable, like a breath taken without awareness. It did not carry sound, it did not carry thought, it carried steadiness. The mountain listened. Listening here meant allowing the wind to exist without asking why it had returned. The night held both of them easily. Darkness did not thicken or retreat. It stayed exactly where it was, flexible enough to hold movement, calm enough to remain restful. Below, sleep remained unchanged. No stirring, no adjustment. Rest did not react to the wind's presence. It trusted it. This openness created space, not emptiness, but room. Room for rest to last longer. Room for calm to settle deeper into the body, into the breath, into the quiet places that do not usually receive attention. The wind remained, not because it was needed, because it fit. The night did not change in response. It did not deepen or thin. It simply held everything together without effort. Somewhere far below, awareness hovered briefly, not waking, not dreaming, just present enough to feel safe. It did not stay. It drifted back into rest naturally, without decision. The wind noticed and stayed gentle. The mountain listened. This chapter of the night was not about transition or ending. It was about duration, about allowing calm to exist longer than expected, without pressure to move on. The wind returned without asking. The mountain listened without responding, and the night, wide and patient, allowed rest to continue, deep, steady, uninterrupted, stretching itself quietly, generously, so sleep could remain exactly where it was for as long as it wished. Nothing rushed, nothing shifted. Everything stayed soft, slow, and safe, held by a mountain that continued listening and a wind that had returned only to deepen the calm that was already there. The night did not feel finished yet. Not incomplete, just unhurried. The mountain sensed this immediately. Listening had never stopped, but now it widened, becoming less focused and more spacious, as if the night itself had decided to hold everything a little longer.
The mountain listened. The wind remained nearby, but it was no longer moving along paths or tracing shapes. It existed as a softness in the air, a quiet continuity that did not need direction. It did not arrive or depart. It stayed because staying felt natural. Darkness rested lightly across the land, not heavy, not thin, balanced. Below, sleep continued without interruption. The body remained deeply relaxed, supported by the night, as if resting on something wide and steady. Breathing flowed slowly, evenly, without any sense of counting. The mind remained distant from thought, drifting in a calm that did not need depth or clarity. The night held all of this without effort. This holding was not active, it was permissive.
The mountain understood this instinctively. Holding does not require force when nothing is trying to escape. The night simply made room for rest to continue, room for time to stretch, room for stillness to settle more comfortably. The wind felt this room and softened further. Earlier, it had returned to extend calm. Now, it barely distinguished itself from the air. Movement and stillness blended so completely that even the idea of change felt unnecessary. The mountain listened. Listening here was not about receiving anything new. It was about remaining open while nothing arrived. Time slowed again, not as delay, as generosity. Moments widened, creating space between them. The night felt longer, not because it resisted morning, but because it was not being pushed toward it. The sky remained dark and gentle. No light pressed forward, no color appeared. Darkness was not holding back the day. It was allowing rest to finish fully. Below, sleep deepened in a quiet way, not sinking further, settling wider.
The body felt heavy and safe, as if gravity itself had softened. Muscles remained loose. Breath continued its slow, steady rhythm. There was no awareness of dreaming or waking. Rest existed on its own. The wind sensed this and remained almost completely still. It did not carry impressions or echoes anymore. It did not speak. It did not guide. It accompanied. The mountain remained steady, unchanged by the lengthening calm. Listening did not fade with time. It did not tire. It did not expect completion. The night continued to hold. This was the long holding, the part of the night where nothing progresses and nothing retreats, where rest does not deepen or lighten. It simply remains, supported by the absence of urgency. The air felt smooth and even, no edges, no pull. Everything that had needed attention earlier had already been released. The night no longer responded to anything. It trusted what had settled. Somewhere far below, a faint awareness hovered for a moment, not waking, not dreaming, just present enough to feel comforted by the calm. It did not stay. It drifted back into sleep without resistance. The wind did not follow it. The mountain did not mark the moment. The night allowed this movement without reaction. Holding does not interfere. The darkness felt wide now, not enclosing, not distant. It surrounded gently, like a familiar space that required no adjustment. The mountain felt perfectly placed within it. Listening now meant staying while nothing changed.
The wind rested fully within the air. There was no difference between its presence and absence anymore. It had become part of the night's texture, part of the calm that held everything together. Time softened even further, not disappearing, losing importance. The night did not care how long it lasted. Length no longer mattered. What mattered was continuity, the gentle agreement of everything to remain as it was. Below, sleep continued uninterrupted. No stirring, no shifts. The body rested completely. The mind remained quiet, unoccupied by images or thought. There was no sense of self or place, only rest, wide and steady. The mountain listened. Listening here did not require awareness. It existed as presence, as openness that did not close even when nothing passed through. The night's holding was kind. It did not protect rest aggressively. It did not guard it. It trusted it enough to let it be. This trust allowed calm to deepen sideways rather than downward, to spread gently through the body, through the breath, through the quiet places that rarely receive attention. The wind remained part of this spread, not guiding it, not shaping it, simply existing within it. The mountain did not change. The night did not rush. Morning remained distant, unimportant. For now, the long holding continued, steady, patient, uninterrupted, allowing rest to remain exactly where it had settled, without pressure to move on, without fear of ending. The mountain listened. The air stayed calm, and the night, wide and generous, continued to hold the world softly, stretching time without strain, keeping stillness without effort, so sleep could remain deep, safe, and complete for as long as it wished.
The night no longer felt like something that moved. It felt like something that held, not tightly, not deliberately. It held the way a wide landscape holds a shadow, without effort, without intention, simply by being large enough. The mountain felt this widening immediately. Listening expanded again, becoming less like attention and more like space itself. The mountain listened. The air was calm beyond stillness now, not quiet because nothing moved, but quiet because movement no longer mattered. The wind was present in the most distant way, not as motion, not as direction, but as a gentle continuity that blended fully into the night. Darkness did not press, it rested. Below, sleep remained deep, steady, unbroken. The body lay heavy and safe, supported not just by rest, but by the absence of any need to adjust. Breathing flowed slowly, evenly, without depth changing, without rhythm being noticed. The mind stayed far from edges.
There were no thoughts to follow, no images to shape. Awareness floated somewhere distant, just present enough to feel comforted by the steadiness of everything,
not present enough to interrupt it. This was the hour where time became wide, not long, not short, wide enough to rest inside. The mountain sensed this widening as a soft release of structure. Earlier, moments had followed one another gently. Now they no longer needed to follow at all. They existed beside each other, overlapping quietly, like layers of calm that did not compete for attention. The mountain listened without preference. The night did not deepen further. It did not thin. It stabilized into something smooth and continuous. Darkness felt even across the land, without edges, without gradients. The wind no longer arrived or stayed. It belonged. If movement happened, it was so subtle it could not be named. If stillness settled, it was so complete it felt natural. There was no contrast left to notice. Time softened further, not fading, losing shape. Minutes no longer mattered. Hours did not announce themselves. The night no longer contained progress. It contained presence. Below, sleep spread outward rather than downward. It did not grow heavier. It grew broader. Rest filled the body evenly, from breath to limbs to the quiet places that usually remain alert. Muscles remained loose without checking themselves. The jaw stayed soft. The shoulders rested where gravity placed them. There was no sense of holding or releasing. Everything had already arrived. The mountain remained steady. Listening now meant allowing the night to exist without observation. It did not track changes. It did not notice stability. It simply remained open, wide enough to hold whatever continued. The air felt smooth and uninterrupted. There were no signals, no markers. Nothing indicated that this moment would end. The night trusted this. Trust made the calm durable. Somewhere far below, a faint stirring occurred, not waking, not dreaming, just the smallest shift of awareness, like a ripple that does not travel far. It did not grow. It did not pull the body upward. It faded. The night allowed this without response. The wind did not follow it. The mountain did not notice it. Time remained wide. This widening was not expansion towards something else. It was spaciousness without direction. The night was no longer leading anywhere. It had settled into itself completely. Darkness remained kind. Light stayed distant. Morning did not approach. It waited somewhere beyond relevance, unimportant to this hour of rest. The mountain listened. Listening now was indistinguishable from being. The wind, if it could still be called that, existed only as a feeling of openness. There was no sense of arrival or departure. The air felt complete on its own. Below, sleep remained untouched. The body rested without memory of effort. The mind remained quiet without attempting silence. Everything existed in a balance that did not need maintenance.
This was the deepest generosity of the night. It did not require rest to deepen. It did not demand stillness to continue. It allowed everything to remain as it was long enough for rest to feel permanent, even though it was not. The mountain remained unchanged.
Listening did not end because nothing new arrived. It continued because openness does not close when space is full. Time stayed wide. The night stayed steady. The air stayed calm. And the world rested inside this wide, unmeasured hour, carried not by sequence or progress, but by the simple permission to remain exactly where it was. Sleep did not move forward. It stayed, held gently by a night that had become spacious enough to rest inside, and a mountain that continued listening, not for sound, not for change, but for the quiet continuity that remained when time itself softened and spread wide enough to disappear. The night did not decide to leave. It learned how to fade, not by pulling away, not by ending itself, but by loosening its edges so softly that nothing felt taken from it. The mountain sensed this before anything else, not as a change, but as a subtle easing, like a breath that no longer needs to be held. The mountain listened. Listening now was vast. It no longer followed wind or stillness. It held the entire shape of the night at once, without focus, without effort. The air felt open and calm, steady enough to remain, flexible enough to change. The wind was no longer separate. It existed as gentleness. Earlier it had moved, rested, returned, stepped back. Now it had dissolved into something quieter than motion. It was the feeling of space between breaths, the softness that allows sleep to stay unbroken. Below, rest continued, deep, wide, and settled. The body lay heavy but comfortable, supported without pressure. Breathing flowed slowly, evenly, without the need to deepen or adjust. The mind remained distant, not searching, not watching. Nothing asked to wake. The night understood this. It did not announce that morning was near. It did not prepare the world for light. It simply softened, becoming less dense while remaining fully present. Darkness thinned gently, not into brightness, into openness.
The sky changed so gradually that there was no clear moment of difference. It remained dark, but the darkness felt lighter, more breathable, like a fabric loosening without tearing. The mountain remained steady. Listening now meant allowing this fading without following it. Change does not need attention to happen. It needs space. The air felt wider, not empty, unburdened. Time returned faintly, not as urgency, but as sequence. Moments began to exist beside one another again, though they did not push forward. They rested quietly, unimportant, optional. The night did not rush this return. It allowed rest to remain as long as it wished. Below, sleep stayed deep enough to be unaware of thinning darkness. The body did not stir. Muscles remained loose. Breath stayed slow and natural. There was no sense of nearing morning, no anticipation of waking. This was the final kindness of the night, to fade without pulling rest with it. The wind, if it could still be named, did not guide this change. It did not carry signals or direction. It remained as softness in the air, ensuring that nothing sharpened, nothing startled. The mountain listened without marking time.
Listening had become presence that did not separate one state from another. Night and morning were not opposites here. They were parts of the same slow movement. The sky lightened just enough to feel spacious. Still no color, Still no glow, only room. The night did not resist this room. It accepted it. Below, awareness hovered briefly, so distant it could not form thought, so light it did not disturb rest. It drifted back immediately, choosing sleep without decision. The night allowed this choice. Nothing was pulled upward, nothing was left behind. The mountain remained unchanged, steady and open. It had listened through movement, stillness, return, release, and now fading. It did not need to adjust to this new quiet. Listening does not depend on darkness. It depends on openness. The air felt smooth and even, as if everything that could settle had already done so. There was no tension left in the night, no weight remaining to be released. Time felt gentle again. Not wide now, not narrow, balanced. The night was no longer holding tightly. It was holding loosely, enough to support rest, enough to allow change when it arrived. Morning waited beyond relevance. It did not press. The mountain listened. The fading continued quietly, almost invisibly. Darkness softened further, but never disappeared. It remained present, blending into the coming light without conflict. This was not an ending. It was a transition so gentle it felt like continuity. Below, sleep rested in its final deep stretch. The body remained calm and heavy. The mind stayed distant, unengaged, content to remain where it was. The night did not rush this. It understood that rest finishes on its own. The wind stayed absent by being present everywhere. There was no trace of movement left to notice. Calm had become self-sustaining. The mountain did not notice when the night reached this point. It simply remained. Listening now meant being available to whatever followed without leaning toward it. The air felt kind. The sky felt open. The night continued to fade gently, not into morning yet, but into readiness. Readiness without anticipation. Everything was prepared, but nothing was asked to begin. The mountain stayed. The world rested. And the night, having learned how to fade without breaking what it had held, continued softly. Loose enough to change, steady enough to support, allowing sleep to remain deep, safe, and uninterrupted for as long as it was needed. The night did not disappear when it finished fading. Something of it stayed. Not darkness, not silence, a feeling. The mountain felt this before anything else. It stood as it always had, steady and unchanged, yet the air around it carried a quiet familiarity, like a calm that had learned the shape of the world and decided to remain. The mountain listened. Listening now was not tied to night or wind or stillness. It existed on its own, gentle and open, available without effort. There was no longer a need to notice changes. Everything that needed to pass through already had. The air felt settled in a final way. Not closed, not complete, integrated. The wind did not return again. It did not need to. What it had carried had already found a place to rest. The pauses, the unsaid things, the weight that once moved through the air, all of it had softened into something quieter than memory. The mountain remained open to it anyway. Below, sleep rested in its deepest, most natural state. The body lay heavy but comfortable, fully supported. Breathing flowed slowly, evenly, without depth needing attention. The spaces between breaths felt just as calm as the breaths themselves. The mind remained distant, not empty, resting. Thoughts did not return to check the moment. Awareness did not pull upward. Everything that usually watches had stepped aside, allowing rest to exist without supervision. This was not effort, it was trust. The sky continued to lighten, though very gently, not into brightness yet, but into softness. The world felt ready without being awake. Light did not press against the edges of the land. It waited patiently, as if it understood that rest should finish in its own time. The mountain listened. Listening now meant remaining present without expecting anything else to happen. The calm that remained was different from the calm of the deep night. It was quieter in a new way, less protective, more resilient. It did not depend on darkness or stillness to exist. It belonged. The air carried this belonging evenly. There were no currents, no movements to follow. Everything felt placed, as if the world had settled into its own shape and decided not to adjust anymore. Time felt gentle again. Not wide, not narrow, simply present. Moments no longer stretched or overlapped. They existed lightly, one beside another, without urgency. The night had loosened completely now, leaving behind a softness that did not ask to be noticed. The mountain did not mark the passage. Listening does not track time. Thoughts did not return to check the moment. Awareness did not pull upward. Everything that usually watches had stepped aside, allowing rest to exist without supervision. This was not effort, it was trust. The sky continued to lighten, though very gently, not into brightness yet, but into softness. The world felt ready without being awake. Light did not press against the edges of the land. It waited patiently, as if it understood that rest should finish in its own time. The mountain listened. Listening now meant remaining present without expecting anything else to happen. The calm that remained was different from the calm of the deep night. It was quieter in a new way, less protective, more resilient. It did not depend on darkness or stillness to exist. It belonged. The air carried this belonging evenly. There were no currents, no movements to follow. Everything felt placed, as if the world had settled into its own shape and decided not to adjust anymore. Time felt gentle again. Not wide, not narrow, simply present. Moments no longer stretched or overlapped. They existed lightly, one beside another, without urgency. The night had loosened completely now, leaving behind a softness that did not ask to be noticed. The mountain did not mark the passage. Listening does not track time. The night was no longer holding tightly. It was holding loosely, enough to support rest, enough to allow change when it arrived. Morning waited beyond relevance. It did not press. The mountain listened. The fading continued quietly, almost invisibly. Darkness softened further, but never disappeared. It remained present, blending into the coming light without conflict. This was not an ending. It was a transition so gentle it felt like continuity. Below, sleep rested in its final deep stretch. The body remained calm and heavy. The mind stayed distant, unengaged, content to remain where it was. The night did not rush this. It understood that rest finishes on its own. The wind stayed absent by being present everywhere. There was no trace of movement left to notice. Calm had become self-sustaining. The mountain did not notice when the night reached this point. It simply remained. Listening now meant being available to whatever followed without leaning toward it. The air felt kind. The sky felt open. The night continued to fade gently, not into morning yet, but into readiness. Readiness without anticipation. Everything was prepared, but nothing was asked to begin. The mountain stayed. The world rested. And the night, having learned how to fade without breaking what it had held, continued softly. Loose enough to change, steady enough to support, allowing sleep to remain deep, safe, and uninterrupted for as long as it was needed.